So if you guys can please turn to page 40 in your notebooks. Remember, you guys need to be copying down these notes in your workbooks, okay? Because I do check them. You get 5 points for watching the Ed puzzle and 5 points for having the notes down in your workbook, okay? So if we turn to page 40, and this is lesson 2.3, measuring change. So the objectives for today: students will understand a relative change is different from an absolute change. A relative measure is always a comparison of two numbers, and students will be able to calculate a relative change and explain the difference between relative change and absolute change. Okay? Absolute change and relative change are two topics that you guys were introduced in the first semester, okay? So really today's topic isn't new, but how it's presented to you is new. Absolute change is when you subtract two numbers and you're finding the difference between the two numbers. And relative change is when you're trying to find either that percent increase or that percent decrease. And we're going to go over that a little bit more, okay? That really is from first semester. So now I know in your guys's, it is 2020 and 2021. Okay, so let me just fix that. Everything else, I believe, is the same. They just changed that. All right, so the table below shows the 2020 and 2021 salaries of several employees at a company named FlexCorp. So we want to calculate the raise that each employee received. So we want to know, how much did each person increase? Okay, so I want to know, Maria, how much did she increase from 2020 salary to 2021? In order to do that, we are going to subtract, okay? When we are subtracting, we're going to be subtracting our new salary minus our old salary, okay? So this is our new, this is our old. You may also hear me say present salary, past salary, okay? So to calculate the raise, I'm going to do present or new minus past. Okay, so I'm going to do the first one for you. So Maria's present was $230,000, and I'm going to subtract her past, which was $200,000, and I got $30,000, and that's an increase, okay? So she increased by $30,000, okay? So what I want you guys to do is I want you to either pause me or I guess a question will come up, and you guys are going to do Peter and Lawrence. Okay, so for Peter, again, you're going to do present minus past. So 144,000 minus 120,000, and I got an increase of 24,000. And then for Lawrence, it's 72,000 minus 600,000, that's 660,000, and the increase was 12,000. Okay, these are all increases because they were positive. They were negatives, we would say decrease. All right, so looking at this, we see that Maria increased the most. Okay, she increased by 30,000, then Peter, then Lawrence. So what we just did is that we calculated, okay, and I'm going to read this right here. So the raises calculated above each represent the absolute change, okay, because remember, we're just subtracting, and we're subtracting that present or that now minus past. now minus past, okay? In the employee salary, the absolute change is the total amount of change between two numbers. In the event of an increase, the absolute change is positive, and in the event of decrease, the absolute change is negative. So when we're dealing with absolute change, order matters. Okay? So what do I mean by order matters? Suppose that my 2021 was really 200,000 and my 2020 was 230,000. Okay, so imagine I switched these. If I were to subtract them using my little formula, now minus past or present minus past, okay, I would then be getting a negative amount. And that would tell me that I decreased in my pay or how much I made, okay? So again, order matters. It has to go, what is my new, my now, okay, minus my past, okay? My new minus my past, my now minus my past, my present minus my past. There's so many ways that you can say it, but just know, and I kind of like the now minus past one, that order matters, and it always goes my newer one, my now, minus my past, okay? So let's look at that second question. It says, at first, Maria was pleased with her raise, but when she learned the amount of her other colleagues' raises, she went to the CEO of the company and complained that the amount of her raise was too low compared to the others. So I want you guys to think about this question. What mathematical justification might Maria have for arguing that her raise was too low? So I want you guys to think about this for a minute, okay? And then give me one or two sentences describing what mathematical justification might Maria have for arguing that her raise is too low. Okay. So when you guys are thinking about this question, you're thinking about how come Maria got the highest absolute change but was unhappy, okay? And the reason why this might be happening is because Maria might have looked at her relative change, okay? And relative change is a fancy way of saying percent change that you guys might have seen in science, okay? So percent change is that absolute change that you got, okay, over whatever happened in your past. So this is, and I'm going to use, I guess now, minus past over past, okay? And when you do that, it's a percent. So in order to get a percent, we multiply by 100. All right, so using this new formula right here, okay, let's calculate Maria's relative change. Okay, let's calculate her relative change. So her relative change, and I'm going to use RC, or you know what, let me write it out so you guys write it out. All right, relative change, okay, and we know that this was our absolute change. I guess I'll do it in a different color. All right, we take this absolute, which was 30,000. We divide it by what she had in her past, what she received in her past, and we're going to times it by 100. When you guys do this, okay, you need to divide first and then multiply by 100. Okay, you need to divide and then multiply by 100. So in order to divide and multiply by 100, it's going to be 30,000 divided by 200,000. I get 0.15, and then I'm going to times that by 100, so I get my percent of 15%. So she had a 15% increase. So from 2020 to 2021, she increased by 15%. Okay? So can you guys find the relative change for Peter? And then I want you guys to find the relative change for Lawrence. Okay. So for Peter, it's 24,000 divided by 120,000. And we multiply that by 100. And I got 20,000. 20%. And then I do the same thing for Lawrence. And I get 12,000 over 60,000. And I also get 20%. Okay, because we times that by 100. All right. So when we look at this, we see, okay, well, Maria had the most increase, but she really technically only increased 15%, where her co-workers increased by 20%. So to answer this question, okay, kind of, it says, why is she arguing? Well, she's arguing because her relative change is lower than her coworkers. Okay, they didn't all increase by the same amount. Okay, and what I mean by amount, I'm meaning by that percent. Okay, yes, she did make more in the long run, but she doesn't have the same increase, okay, or the same raise as all her other co-workers. Okay, so I have another question for you. If we did use the same percent as Peter and Lawrence for Maria, what should Maria's salary become in this case? Okay, so if I use that 20% increase, what would Maria's salary be? So take a second, I want you guys to think about that. Okay, so what you guys needed to do was take your your past, okay, and we're going to add 20% of it, okay? So really I'm finding what's 20% of my 200,000, and then I'm going to add it to my 200,000, and that's what Maria should have received, okay? So this is 200,000 plus, and that's 0.2. I'm just showing you my steps. 200 plus 40, and this equals 240,000. So if Maria got the same amount as increase as the rest of her coworkers, she would have been making 240,000. However, she only made 230,000. Okay. Another way that you guys could have done this, okay, this is not the only way to do this, but you could have taken your 200,000 and multiplied it by that 1.2. Okay, because really if I'm increasing by 20%, I'm really increasing by 120%. Okay, and that was like from, I want to say lesson 1.3 maybe, on how we did that. Okay, and then we don't really have to add it to anything because we get the right salary. All right, so this is why relative change is really important. Okay, we can't just look at that absolute change because it doesn't tell us the big picture. So let's try another question. All right, so the table below shows the share prices for 3 stocks over the course of a year. So we have Google, Microsoft, Best Buy, and Facebook. Price per share. So share means that you basically get a piece of a company. If anybody's into looking at like the stock market, okay, this is how you basically are going to figure out which company should you invest in, okay? So This 350 tells me that in order to buy one share in Google in 2012, it cost us $350. To buy one share of Microsoft, it costs us $27. For Best Buy, for one share, it costs $11. So for instance, if I want to buy 2 shares in Best Buy, it would be $22, okay? And then it shows us in 2013 and what it increased by, okay? So now if I wanted to have a share in a company, and that's really what stocks are, you kind of buy part of the company, okay? And very little, okay? One share is not a lot. But now here, it cost me $559 for that one share, okay? Or $37 for that one share. All right? So looking at the list, or the list that's here, okay? Which company do you think performed the best during this period? So which one do you think had the best performance, okay? Because think about it, the better the company is, it's going to keep going up, okay? So everyone did pretty well because they all went up in 2013. There is no right or wrong answer for right now, okay? I just want to know what you guys are thinking. Do you think Google did the best, Microsoft, Best Buy, and Facebook? So just tell me which one you think did the best. Okay, so I'm going to assume that majority of you guys probably picked Google because it costs the most for each share, okay? So I'm going to assume that you guys click Google, and we're going to use Google for our next question, okay? And we're also going to use Best Buy because it's not the lowest, okay? But I like Best Buy and Google. So let's look at this next question. Suppose you had $20,000 to invest at the beginning of 2013, and you choose 2 of the above 4 stocks to invest. We're going to invest $10,000 in each, and we're going to calculate the total value of the investment at the end of the year. You cannot buy part of a share. So if I can only buy 1 share, 2 shares, 3 shares, 4 shares. I can't buy 2.5 shares, okay? So what does this mean? I'm going to start off with Google, okay? So let's say I have $10,000 floating around, and I say, okay, I want to invest that into Google, okay? The first thing we need to know is how many shares is my 10,000 going to get me? All right, so I want you guys to calculate how many shares can you buy with this $10,000. All right, so in order to do that, we know that Google was $350 for 1 share. So if we take this 10,000 and we divided it by 350 shares, well, not really shares, that's money per 1 share, okay, we get 28.57 shares, and that's okay. It's okay to have 0.7 of a share, but it's not okay to buy 0.57 of a share, okay? So now, this is what it was in 2012. But in 2013, my shares cost $559. So if you guys ever buy stocks, okay, you want to buy them at a low price. And as the company does well, the stocks on that, the amount of money per stock increases. When you sell it, the difference that there's a difference that you made, and we're going to go over what that profit is, okay? But here, we're going to now sell, okay, because I don't want it anymore. I'm over Google. We're going to sell that 28.57 shares, and we're selling it at a price of $559. So how do I find out how much I'm technically making right now? Okay. In order to do that, I need to multiply this times this, because this was for one share. Well, I have way more than one share. So I'm going to do that 559 times that 28.57, and I get, or I made, this is how much money I received by selling it. Okay? But if you remember from the beginning, okay, I didn't put in $0. I didn't get these shares for free. I had to put in 10,000. So in the long run, I really only made, which is a pretty good profit, of 5,971. That's my profit that I made by investing 10,000 into Google. Okay? Well, you guys are going to try Best Buy. All right? If the profit that I made for Google is greater than the profit that I made for Best Buy, then we are correct. Okay? Then that means that I made more money, so Google obviously was the better ranked company. Okay? But if I made more for Best Buy, then the question 4, they did better performing. Okay? So I want you guys to take a second and do that. I want you guys to find that profit. Okay, so we have this 10,000. We invested it into Best Buy. Okay, and it was $11 per share. So to find out how many shares I can make or have, I divided these, and I got 909.09. Then I want to sell my shares. Now, if you notice, I get a lot more shares in here because they cost less. I'm going to sell it at $40 per share. So when I sell it, that means I need to multiply these. And when I multiplied them, I got 36,364. But remember, I invested 10,000. So how much did I really make? I really made a profit of 26,364. So really, Best Buy was a better performance than Google. Now, who wants to do all this? Okay? Not me. All right? This takes forever. Okay? So we can mathematically compare the performance of Best Buy stock to Google stock. So here we're performing our profit. We're comparing our profit. But if I want to just do my Best Buy stock to my Google stock, all I need to look at is my relative change. Okay? So for instance, I'm going to do the relative change of Google. So let's see. So we take our absolute change, which is our now minus our past over our past. And we're going to multiply that by 100. When you guys do this in the calculator, I want you to take it step by step. 559 minus 350. We get 209. Divided by 350 times 100. I'm going to not times that, I'm going to divide that by 350. I get 0.597. And then I'm going to times that by 100. So Google's relative change was 59.7%. Okay? Now, what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to calculate it for Best Buy. Tell me what the relative change was, and round to the nearest 10th. Okay, so Best Buy was 40 minus 11 over 11 times 100, and I got 263.6%. So just by looking at the relative change of the stocks, we can see that Best Buy did way better, had a way better increase than Google. But by how much? Okay, so I want to find that times, and if we remember, okay, this 2 means divide. So if I take Best Buy's stock, or relative change, and I divide it by my Google relative change, I get a 4.55 times better, okay, for Best Buy. What's interesting is that if I were to take my 2 profits and also divide them, I'm going to get something really close to that 4.55. Let's see what we get. 26364 divided by 5971. Oh, let me redo that. 26364 divided by 5971. I get roughly 4.4. Okay, it's close. We have some rounding errors, okay? We rounded here when we were doing our percents. We rounded to the nearest 10, so obviously it's going to be off, okay? So this was very close. Either way works. I personally think that number 6, doing relative change, is much easier to grasp, okay? All right, let's look at this last problem. So the GDP, the gross domestic product, represents the total amount of goods and services produced by a nation in a given year. The table below shows the GDP for several countries over a period of years in trillions of dollars. Okay, so all of these numbers are in trillions when we're thinking about it. Oh, well, this one says billions. It should not be billions. This should say trillions because that's what it says in your book. Okay? So, it says estimate which country above represents the largest absolute change in GDP and which country represents the greatest relative change. So right now, I want you guys to actually calculate the absolute change for all these, and then you guys are going to tell me which one was the largest. All right, so do that right now. Okay, so again, remember, when we do absolute change, we take that now minus past, okay? So for US, it was 20.94 minus 14.99, so that was, I believe, 5.95 trillion, okay? India is 2.623 minus 1.676, and we get 0.947 trillion. And Germany was 3.806 minus 3.396, and we get 0.41. So the greatest absolute change was US. All right? And now I want you guys to calculate the relative change. And let's round to the nearest 10th. Okay, so when we do relative change, we take our absolute value, or absolute change, and we divide it by our past. We multiply it by 100. So for US, we have 39.63%, and I said in round to nearest tenth, so that's 100, so that doesn't work. Okay. For India, it was 0.947 divided by 0.1676 times by 100, and that's 56.50. And then again, Snarl keeps doing that. It is tenths. And then 0.41 divided by 3.396 times by 100, and we get 12.1%. Okay? So these are our relative change. And if we notice in this one, India was my greatest relative change. So let's look at question 5. Question 5 says, which of the countries' economics grew the fastest? So this is referring to our percent, okay? And which of the countries' economics grew the most? And this is my difference, my absolute value, my absolute change. All right, so take a second. I want you guys to answer which of the above countries grew the fastest. Okay, and if we look to see which one grew the fastest, okay, we see that India, okay, grew the fastest because it had a bigger percent. This was like roughly 56%. All right, and then which of these countries' economics grew the most? Okay, is actually our US. They grew the most because they had the biggest difference. All right, so that's what those two types of questions you might be asked when you're dealing with relative and absolute change. 6, make a prediction of India's GDP in 2030. Justify your answers in complete sentences using precise mathematical terminology. So first we have to think, are we going to use the percent or the dollar amount? Okay. In this case, we want to use the percent, and we're going to assume that the next 10 years, they're going to grow the same amount. Okay, they're going to grow just as fast. So I want you to find out, what would India's GDP be in 2030? And remember, we grew by that 56.5%. Okay, so we're going to take this 56.5 of 2020 year, and then we're going to add it to whatever the 2020 year was. Okay, so this is going to be that 56.5% of, I believe it was 2.623, and then we're going to add it. Right? Remember, this is one way to do it. Not the only way, but this is one way. So 0.565, and that of means multiply. We get 1.48 increase plus 2.623, and that's going to be 4.103, somewhere around there, trillion dollars. Okay, so that's basically relative and absolute value change. Okay, So I want you guys to copy all these notes in here, put stars next to some things that you guys don't know, and when I have office hours or remind, reach out to me, and you guys are going to have 2.3 to do, okay?